Mi gente Latino Way, bienvenidos una vez más. Yo soy Reina Figueroa y para mí es un placer el hoy presentarle a un gran amigo mío que hoy está celebrando su libro. ¿Cómo estás, Ben? How are you?
Very good. Thank you so much. Todo bien.
Uh,
Gracias.
it's a pleasure to have you here with us. So we are celebrating. Tell me a little more about this.
Absolutely, we are. I just released a book, my first book. I didn't consider myself an author before this, but here we are. I got a book out. I felt like it was just a needed to kind of package my ideas in something and for me to feel good about it. So you have it. I think that you've kind of, you said that you kind of enjoyed the process, a little bit of reading it. So let me give you a little bit of break of it. So, it's called the Zero Mindset, and the idea of it is to break a lot of the social rules and calibrations that you've been taught in your life so you can actually build something from zero. So it's absolutely around establishing a mindset that enables you to build something from zero. And while it is kind of geared around a business, I don't want it to feel like that's the limiting factor. I want it to feel as if I use vision to replace the word business in here a lot, because I do want to make it as general as possible, because a lot of the rules and kind of the way you deem business is kind of also kind of how you can deem some parts, other visions in your life, whether that just be a personal brand, whether that be an actual business, whether that not be, whether that's going into starting playing the piano. I think there's a variety of things that come with starting over and a recalibration when starting from zero. Now, most people would say, well, what does zero mean? So at first, at face value, I think a lot of people couple zero with immobility and they couple it with deficit. But zero to me, and which is why I wrote the book, is zero is that ultimate power point. It's that ultimate point of recalibration. It's that ultimate point of, okay, I actually can have a clear perspective on things now. Not, oh, I am back at zero. It is that I've had the fortunate of hitting zero at this point in my life, that you can actually have a clear perspective on developing direction, so you can actually develop speed. So like, even when I say reset, it's not a reset just in allocation of energy. It's not like, I go from Wall Street to becoming a singer and I just got to reallocate my energy. It's a recalibration of what you've even like been taught to establish the mindset you had before. So, and I think that there's a lot of social rules and laws, which I get into in the book, that need to be bent, twisted, and turned and questioned. And, that's what I try and highlight, because I don't mean to ramble so much, but I do want to get to the point, which is what I've experienced is that what prevents people mostly from starting or restarting or just pursue whatever that is that's in their head at that moment to pursue and they feel really passionate about, whatever typically stops them is not a lack of resources. It's not a lack of time, money, energy, connections. Those are typically the things that we start with. We say, well, I don't have, and it's all these factors. But traditionally, it's actually more of a mindset factor. It's more of the personal issue thing. It's more of the way they see failure. It's how they deem whatever they're doing risky or not. It's, how hard should I be working? What will my parents think? Will my friends hit me with this? Oh, you did this, but you tried, but you failed. There was all these personal issues, and it didn't relate to the amount of resources one had, or the amount of money that they had and able to do something. It was much more of a personal tie to saying, I don't have this, or I'm afraid of what so-and-so is going to think of me. So it was much more of a mindset around starting from zero, more than it was a lack of anything.
I agree with you. There's a section in this book where you talk about the generation passed down. What are those social rules that have been passed down, and to which generation?
Well, yeah, I think that, you're right. And thank you for pointing that out. I do. I kind of, I try and set the base of this book with a with a layer of optimism stemming from practicality, not just like blindly like, oh, we lived in such a great time. And that's not really where I wanted to come at it from. I did want to come at it from listening. We are living in the most opportunistic time for sure. No question. And we also live in a time where we have the privilege of having tools at our fingertips that, past generations could only dream and imagine to have. They could only be like, well, can you imagine something like that? So the idea that we don't live in such a privileged moment, at least throughout history, is kind of crazy to me. So I do make the point that, there has been information the information that has been gathered over past generations has been gathered to survive in certain areas. I'm sorry, certain eras of their existence. So, you have the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and there was this magical point what happened in the early 2000s when the internet really became a thing, or at least started. And then over the past 20 years, it's only gotten so much momentum behind it, and the type of freedom as a freedom tool that it's given people. And even the ability to have our conversation right now about starting something from zero was never really a concept that was widely talked about, accepted in the past generations, because most of the principles and rules and social rules, or even laws that they were discussing, were more based in survival mode because we had to get by. So why would you, these are not, our conversations today were not necessarily some average conversations that were going on in the past. So there may be there's so much information from the past that has been transmitted down. And it's just because we live in such a different world than even 25 years ago. We live in such a different world. Sure, some principles still stand, of course they do, but on a part of opportunity, these things have drastically changed. And I have in the book, I have these 10 zero principles that I outline. And these zero principles they are principles to help establish a mindset around building from zero, but also in their nature, they kind of question some of the passed down ideals that may be indoctrinated into our heads, that is actually preventing us. I think that there's a lot of them, but I could list the top couple, because I can go through each one if you want, but the top couple that I feel like are most impactful in our generation would be the idea of failure, and what our parents think of us successing or failing. It could be our idea of risk. Why do we deem things so risky? And maybe that's a thing that was slowly but surely passed down through generation to generation, because they also live in a completely different moment where their risk was associated with not what we associate risk with. We associate risk with uncomfort. They mainly associate risk with living, for the most part. And all these things kind of pass down. What's another one? I think our idea of hard work in itself is also another one. But I only want to list 3 or 4. Those are the top 4 that I would say are like one of the biggest. Risk, failure, hard work being overrated, in my opinion. So I'd make a case of why hard work, I think, is overrated, and it's modern day concept of hard work is overrated.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and I just think that it's been hit in you so hard about working hard work. And at least for me, I didn't grow up with much, but I know that most of the hardest working people around me didn't have much. So I don't know why this hard work is being slapped into our existence today, like it's like the thing that matters. I get it once you establish some direction, but even once you have direction, like how hard can you possibly work when your energy is finite? You don't have infinite energy, you have finite energy. So there comes a point where your system gets taxed, and all you get to worry about is what you're working hard on. You become more of a mule.
I'm going to be honest with you. Something I have been reading your book, and
Sure.
what that I have enjoyed the most is where you share your story. That you said that you didn't have the privilege of having lots of things as a kid. Do you think that thanks to that, now you are able to appreciate the little things in life?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. Yes, for sure. I yes, but here's the thing. I think that I do say that I am kind of very open, but more than open, I'm a pretty I don't want to say closed, but I'm pretty composed about I don't expose too much information about my past typically. So that part was specifically sensitive vulnerability that I'm not used to doing. And I was like, how much should I say? Should I say? But I think it was important to state some of the things to lay the groundwork of why the rest of the information in the book is relevant. So I do go into my story and what, how I may have not have had all these factors. And I think when you grow up in an environment like that, you don't necessarily know you don't have the factors until you're out of that environment as an adult, but you're not aware of what else is out there, especially before the internet happened. This wasn't not a thing. You're not oh, I get to see kids from Long Island or Jersey or wherever or other countries and just be this is what they have, this is what I don't have. You're not really noticing that. You're just noticing the people around you. Everybody's in that position. So it's not really a factor. But I also do go into the point, and yes, that definitely helped shape my mindset around zero for sure. But I also go into the part where, like, regardless of what I had or didn't have, even putting that in true perspective for myself, even giving myself that, it's still one of the most privileged positions to be in throughout all history. And I think that needs to be the perspective that we should be looking through. It's like, regardless of what you have or don't have, there's always way worse. And sure, at some point you go to a point where there's not much way worse, but for the most part of people throughout history, even in modern times, I think we like to give ourselves stories on why things can't or won't happen in our life. And so, I try to do that. I tried to write that from a humbleness perspective of, yes, sure, I didn't have these things, but in true perspective, people have done way more than I have with way less. So I don't know what, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I want to read something from here, and I want you
Oh,
to
shit. Okay.
explain it, because
Oh, wow. Okay.
I found this very interested. So it says, whatever your zero is, you must identify it, accept it, and then map out your direction from there. What are you trying to say with that?
That's actually that's a good line to pull. So what I was trying to say with that is, a lot of times like I was saying before, we have such like a negative connotation around the concept of zero, just seeing the number itself. And my point is that you don't really want to run from the fact that you have zero in any category in your life. I don't think it's a point to say, I'm gonna fetch, I'm gonna bounce from this, because when you don't identify something, there is no conversation to move forward on. If you don't identify it, there is no progression from that. There is no, let me change this factor in my life. So my point with that was that, like, if you don't identify, right before that, I kind of go into this like little rant of like personal accountability, as I can remember, about taking full accountability over your life and over you're not necessarily just this sum of things that have happened to you in your life or the position you're in, but you're absolutely fully responsible for how you deal with that and how you move out of that. So you can't just play that like, that victim mentality kind of spreads like wildfire across your whole body. You can't play that game with yourself, because it's a very dangerous game to play when you start giving yourself justification on what is happening to you and why you can't do something. So that part of that was basically saying that, if you don't identify this zero in your life, whatever that zero is, and if you don't acknowledge that you're starting over, and you don't tell yourself, I'm really starting over, if you kind of breeze past the fact that you're starting over, like, oh, man, I'm not really, I can use, I'm not fully starting over. I think you should just need to immerse yourself in the fact, and that you don't have any relationships in this field. Just straight out say it to yourself. It needs to be real. You need to be like, all right, I don't have. How can I get? You know what I mean? I think that you can't, I don't want there to be delusion. I just think that needs to be confronted before. I even say that's probably like in the beginning part of the book, but I try and put that in the forefront so that there is no lying, and there's just truth, acknowledgement of truth. And that from that acknowledgement of truth, there's actually something to do from it. And then if you don't acknowledge the truth, it gets gray, and you don't know how to identify the issue, and you don't know how, or even if it's an issue at the moment, you don't know how to identify it. So that's kind of what I mean.
And how was the process of writing the book?
Oh man, let's not get there. It was tense for sure. And I'll tell you why. It's definitely fulfilling now at this particular moment, but the process of writing the book was hard. And it's hard for me specifically because I wouldn't say I'm a natural writer. I don't have like I'm not really skilled. I'm not like the most skilled writer, and I don't really enjoy writing too much. I enjoy talking, and I enjoy communicating like this. See, I'm doing this with my hands. I enjoy this. And I use my tone a lot, and I use my body language a lot, and my facial expressions a lot. And none of my tools that I typically use were able to be translated here. They were just, I couldn't use any of them. So because nobody understood the way I typically communicate, it was very difficult for me to try and make it so widely applicable in a book. And quite frankly, writing this book was absolutely I like to identify it as a point of zero for me. Like, I've never done this. I have no connections in the writing, in the self-publishing space. I had to figure, like, I'm sure if I asked a writer, like, hey, like, what would it take to like get this thing, they would kind of like, oh, it's definitely gonna be complicated, and that would already put me off of like what it really takes. And I think that happens with most industries, especially now. It's like, oh, I'm gonna write a book. They're like, oh, good luck. You gotta like go get this guy and then this guy, and you're like, you know what I mean? It's like, that's what I mean. It's like I try not to like infiltrate my stuff, my mind with all like the past social norms of each industry. And this was absolutely a point of zero for me, because it was very difficult. I didn't, I tried to structure it as best as way I could. What's that?
Do you think that you will do it again, like in the future, publish another book? Or?
Yeah, no, I probably will do it again, because of the feeling of like fulfillment it has. Like, it was very real to be like, oh, this is real. Like, I can touch something that I wrote, and like, I really did it because like my mom and dad were like, oh shit, like Ben's name is on the front, and I was like, oh yeah, that's me. You know what I mean? It definitely felt like a way, but like, and I think that was definitely fulfilling for sure. So I probably will. Yeah.
And what's the difference between the black and the white cover?
Yeah. Actually, there is no difference in the manuscript itself. The difference is that the white is the paperback, and this is on Amazon, and this is the hardcover, and it's only through me. So like I sell these personally. Like, I typically sign these. Yeah, and send it. I know you got the signed one.
Hey, here.
Yes. Yeah. See, so that's the difference. I just wanted to make it fun. I wanted to make it like black and white. I wanted to make it, a little more interesting for me. And I'm trying to like bring some of the stuff that I have done in the past to make it interesting. So I like the white and the black, and I wanted to make it fun.
You also talk about your mom, your dad, and your brother. What role have they played in your life? What are they saying now?
Yeah, there is definitely a section. So I try not to I think the thing is, like, I had like the insecurity about making this thing too personal to me, though it is, because it's a concept I'm developing. But I didn't want to make it about me, because I want people to grab the concept and not feel like I'm trying to tie it all back to Ben. But I definitely, I did speak of my mom and how her optimism has helped shape the vision in itself. Her and my grandmother, which is her mom, and I kind of list, I don't talk too much about it, but I definitely mention of how impactful they've been in the idea itself, not knowingly contributing to the concept, just, the presence and what I've learned from them over the years. And my dad as well. And I have a whole chapter in here, I think, the uninfluenced mind, the power of the uninfluenced mind. It's not a whole chapter, but it's the second zero principle that I have in here. And I list my brother in that part, because my brother has Asperger's disease. So it's one of those things where, like, and even Asperger's has its own massive spectrum, but there's just this level to his ability to be uninfluenced by social norm and opinion and perspective that I didn't fully acknowledge how powerful that perspective on the world was until I got older, because we've been so indoctrinated with others' opinions, and there's this superpower that nowadays it's actually a superpower now. It wasn't in the past, because we didn't have this global connectedness, but now that we do, there's a superpower to to having original thought and original idea that can be fully progressed and sought out and like seen through without the opinions of others holding the idea back. Because most of the people who have the opinions, they've already been indoctrinated with information themselves. And not to say that it's wrong information, it just might not be conducive to the world we live in your specific idea. So we tend to take a lot of the opinions a lot. We kind of, and even if we don't want them, they kind of always infiltrate in us, like, oh, should I not do it? Should I hold back? And there's this superpower of being uninfluenced, which I talk about in there, that, some of the quote unquote, the great minds have, like the Elon Musks of the world, or the Zuckerbergs of the world, or the Peter Thiels of the world, or whatever. and the Kanyes of the world. There's this superpower that they have of not listening to the opinion of something, and they're, by the way, that comes with, it's not like specifically positive. There's obviously some negative associated with that as well, but there's a healthy level of it which is not fully discussed, and that just means that like you're actually able to build something, you're actually able to go through with something from your original idea. And the more people that get involved, the less originality it actually has, the more it becomes a society formed idea, even if they are your friends. It's not that they intend to do bad. It's just that just naturally happens. So part of that, I discussed my brother and the impact that he's had on me. And again, not intentionally, it's just observing him and how he is just not formed by social conformity at all. They don't, people's opinions on what he wears don't really change what he wears or anything like that. And part of that is kind of inspiring. And part of that means that I kind of just wish I had more of it.
You have been doing a little bit of everything. Like, you have been all over the place. But what's the next step for Ben? What are we going to see you doing next?
No, I appreciate the question again. And I've given some thought to this for sure, without trying to like embrace this moment of the book too much. Because for me, like, just to be clear, like this wasn't necessarily about the book per se. It was a concept that I wanted to kind of live on for quite some time. Well, maybe, hopefully one day it lives past my existence. And I think that because the book was such a first start and put so much pressure on the book, I was like, well, it's just the book. I want to do, the idea of zero to me means so much that I want to do in other areas and other things with other, even whether it's the use of me or through other people as well. So, I just started a zero business group. So me and a couple of people started a business group where we kind of sit down with personal brands and make them personal businesses. And it kind of is, a lot of it's based off of like some of the ideas in here. So that's kind of exciting. And I got like that. And there's a couple of ideas and ways I want to use the zero going forward. But because this was such a new playground for me to play in terms of writing, and, I've done some like short little videos in the past, which I like doing. I'm just starting to get into like different avenues. And because the way I see it is kind of like, if you have a message or more of like a mantra that you kind of want to live in, you don't necessarily need to be limited to a specific art form. I don't think, I don't think a writer that has an idea and a concept should be necessarily limited to writing. If he wants to make an album, tell him to make an album, but if he doesn't feel confident in those abilities, then maybe he shouldn't. But my point is, he's not limited to just writing. And I think that's kind of where my head's at. Became back to like, when I started businesses, I didn't, if I start a business on healthy living, it doesn't mean that my idea and my belief on healthy living is limited to that business. It could go in another business. I could do stand-up comedy, and I could do that. There's a number of ways which I can get that voice out. And not to say that my voice is the most important, but it's absolutely something I'm experimenting in right now. So I would like to do some like performances that I'm working on right now. Of course.
Where can they get the book?
Yeah, well, you can get on Amazon or just bennyhartinc.com. You can get either one of them at bennyhartinc.com. And this one's on Amazon for $16.99. This one's for $44.99 on my signature. It's hardcover, just a little different, a little more exclusive, a little more black. And yeah, I appreciate you having me. Thank you so much, man. I really do appreciate this.